Well, let's talk about the properties of life. See if it can help us determine whether or not something is alive. Like this. Is this alive? No heartbeat. Must not be. Well, of course not. It's a rock. Look at that side. Actually, these crusty little lichens on here are alive, but no, they don't have a heartbeat either. Well, the point of talking about properties of life is not really to make a list and determine whether or not something is currently alive. We need a different measurement to do that. It's a way to look at living things and the differences in how they go about life. For example, energy use. We eat things, plants do photosynthesis. Very different. But all living things, no matter what, really at some point have to do these things as a species over time. This is not exactly a checklist. It's just a way to appreciate the different facets of living things because they're really complex. Now, a lot of these properties can apply at a variety of scales, like order or organization. You can look at that at a cellular scale, where all living things are made out of cells, right? They have DNA in the middle, a membrane around them, and we can see it at that scale. True of all living things. But many living things have similar body plans, a right and a left half, a radially symmetrical. They have the same organs. You know, if you were to look at any human being, we have the same organs. We have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. That's a sign that a living thing is displaying order. Energy use. Like I said before, plants get their energy from the sun, so do algae, whereas other living things get it from food. We get it slightly differently than fungi do. We both eat organic matter, but we eat it with our mouths. They absorb it through their cells. Yeah, but if that's all there is to life, then wouldn't like a vacuum cleaner or my phone be alive? You know, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked. Yeah, I mean, if we just took these 2 things, energy use and order, they could apply to all kinds of stuff. But we need to look at the whole list. And again, this is not a checklist. This is not something we look at to see if something is alive right now. This is just properties that all living things exhibit, a way that we can study them. But true, vacuum cleaners would look alive if you only looked at those first 2 things. How do you know that something is using energy? Well, a couple key things. It moves around, it grows, it changes over time. All good indications that something is using energy. Well, animals have a nervous system like this over here, and so they can respond pretty quickly to the environment around them. Look at this little marmot right here. She's probably using her eyes to look out for danger and the ears to hear that as well. She can feel the ground. Lots of different ways of getting input of the environment around her to keep her safe and well. Might also notice that there are plants over there that she might go and nibble on that she can use for energy later. But you don't have to have a nervous system to respond to stimuli. Plants do this really well themselves. So they have to know what time of year it is. They sense light with their cells in order to bloom at the right time so that their flowers are open when the pollinators are there. And even in a more simple sense, notice how plants always grow upward? They have to sense gravity in order to grow against it. So all living things, whether it's complex or simple, respond to the stimulus from their environment around them. Another one that's a big topic of anatomy and physiology in particular is homeostasis and the closely related regulation. So homeostasis, if you break down the word, means steady state, keeping internal conditions steady. So this has to do with the inside of the body. Look at these ring-tailed lemurs over here. This thermal image allows us to see that they are staying warmer than the environment around them. So they stay different. And they keep that steady over time. So we can see it in the image, but really what we are concerned about is the graph. Over time, if we were to look at that on a graph over time, then that image, the body temperature, might go up and down a little bit, but stays pretty steady. And regulation is similar although it changes based on maybe the season or day and night, based on what's appropriate. So regulation is a little bit different than homeostasis. Regulation has more to do with changing conditions and keeping the body regulated over time. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the difference between homeostasis and regulation. Yeah, good question. It is a subtle difference. Homeostasis, let's look at just blood sugar for both of these. Homeostasis would be throughout the day. Your blood sugar goes up after a meal, and homeostasis means you bring it back down to a normal level. In between meals, you get a little low on blood sugar, and your body brings it back up to a normal level. That would be a good example of homeostasis. Regulation is a little more situational. Let's say you're really stressed, and so your body secretes a different hormone that raises your blood sugar a little above normal to prepare you to deal with that stress. That would be regulation. Or even just your body's metabolism. Winter and summer is a little bit different. You crank up your metabolism to stay warm over the winter. Or like bears do, hibernate during the winter and really decrease their metabolic rate. That would be a better example of regulation. Homeostasis, in a more technical sense, is keeping things the same all the time. These next three, growth, development, and reproduction, are all really part of the human life cycle, right? Although all organisms do this to a certain extent. The growth is just getting bigger. We all start out as one cell, and we have to get bigger. Usually that's by adding more cells. Development has to do with sexual maturity. So for us, that's puberty, allowing us to get to the next stage of reproduction, making offspring. That sounds weird. So if I don't have kids, am I not alive? Yeah, that's a good point. Just because you don't have kids doesn't mean you're not alive. Again, not a checklist. This is just a way to appreciate how different organisms do things. But over the long term, as a species, if we didn't reproduce, we would soon go extinct. Which kind of brings us to this last bit of adaptation or evolving. Now the word adapt is a little tricky. It can be used in a variety of ways. Homeostasis and regulation, those are a form of adaptation. So it's responding to stimuli. We're adapting to our environment to keep ourselves safe. But in another sense, adaptation is evolving. Long-term changes to a species over multiple generations. Evolving to fit their environment and survive long-term. And if species don't do this, then again, they're going to go extinct. Basically, if you have DNA, then you can evolve. If that DNA within the species changes over time, that's evolution. And we can talk about that a little more in a different episode. So I'd like to recap by putting this into three categories. Order kind of stands on its own: maintenance and persistence. So this sort of order or structure is true of all things, but again, for us, that comes down to a cell. So it needs to be a cell with some DNA in it to be a living thing. So a specific kind of order. The next three or four, if you count these as two categories, all are about maintenance. These help maintain order or structure. If you don't spend energy, then your body just falls apart. And so you have to do all these things in order to maintain life, basically. And then lastly, persistence. These are the long-term things. If you don't grow, develop, reproduce, then your species goes extinct along with evolving. So we kind of categorize them that way, and it helps. It's not a perfect categorization, like all of these really go into persistence as well, but it's one way to take a look at it. One way to test your understanding of all of these is to really try to apply it. Apply to something something familiar, like a pet or a plant that you have in your yard. Can you figure out how they display each one of these? If you want to go even a step further, think about how you personally have witnessed this. A tough one would be like order. You can't just say that your dog is made out of cells. Unless you've dissected your dog, and I hope you have not, you don't really personally know that it's made out of cells. But how else could you think of that it displays this order or organization to it? That's it for now. If you have comments or questions, I welcome you to leave those, and I hope this has helped you appreciate life just a little bit more. See you next time.